So then how do you come back for season 4?
Because they gave me a cast iron guarantee that the McDonald's sponsorship was ending. There's still McDonald's idents on Series 4, but the contract they signed was for 2 years.
Right.
So basically, they got me back because Series 3 was a complete car crash.
Yeah.
And the ratings plummeted, and there was some very big groveling phone calls, and I said I want it in writing that there's going to be no more sponsorship of this show from McDonald's when the current contract ends. So I came back.
It says here, for the third series, Dexter Fletcher became the main presenter. This change was criticised by fans who saw the new host as over the top and too in your face. So basically he was poochified by some sort of focus group who were like, we need him to be in your face. And I go, oi, GamesMaster! And
yeah.
I don't know, I've no special hatred of Dexter Fletcher, but when even as a kid, this would have been about 13, I was like, hang on a second, something's not right here.
Who's this guy?
Yeah. And they dropped all of the co-presenters and put Dave Perry on as a regular co-host, and they tried to make it, by the looks of it, a bit more focused on just doing one challenge throughout the whole episode, which made it much more boring, because you were like, oh, come on, I'm sick of this football game, or whatever.
I have not watched more than a few minutes of that series. I mean, I know roughly what happened in it, but I was really ticked off. I remember I obviously watched the opening of it because you're going for the vanity reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember Dexter Fletcher held up
your jackets. Anyway,
hated red jacket, and this bloke's burnt out.
Yeah, on level 2.
Yeah, I was like, oh, you vindictive little shits. I thought there's no reason to do that, but my experience of working in the media. See when you leave a show, holy cow. There is it all turns on you. It's the most horrific, dishonourable kind of line of employment, the most horrible, dishonourable way of living ever.
That's what I mean. They got you back for the next season, which normally is unheard of. If a person walks, I mean, you chose to walk, and I fully agree with your decision at that point. It makes complete sense now. When my 12-year-old self was just upset, that you'd left the show, but. Yeah. You don't normally get invited back, so I can only imagine that the ratings on that, there was plenty of people like me who's like, oh, this is rubbish, I'm not watching this.
Yeah.
Although you did miss 2 Unlimited.
And I miss Simon Anstill.
True.
Who was Simon Anstill from Never Mind the Bus Calls.
Yeah.
He was a punter on that program. He was a challenger on that series.
What, as like a kid or something?
Yeah, I missed the chance to cross paths with him. I would like to have met him.
And indeed, Randy Savage and the Mary Whitehouse Experience. Wow, this is like this captured the age by having on all the goofy B-list stars of the time, of Britain at least. Okay, so that was Series 3, and you came back for Series 4 and carried on with that. As the show went on, and the PlayStation came in, and the 3DO and all the other various consoles aimed at adults with massive pay packets, or the PlayStation, a kid could not afford a PlayStation on pocket money and mowing lawns. You'd have to mow a hell of a lot of lawns to get that. So, but they were also growing up and getting jobs. So, the whole industry was maturing. How did that affect the show?
Never use a word like maturing without a show.
Maturing in inverted commas.
It's bizarre because we never, we obviously helped, kick the video games industry into a different level, and but we never really saw ourselves as part of the industry, part of the video games industry. We were part of the TV industry, and for us, things like the 3DO and the PlayStation, pure and simply for us, it meant games with better visuals, which equals a better television spectacular.
Yeah.
So we weren't aware of the kind of financial side or anything. It just got better and better for us, the better the visuals became.
So why did it all end?
Do you know what? I'm not really sure. I think it was a mixture of a couple of things. We got really pissed off with Channel 4 when they moved the time slot. They moved us from 6:30 to 6 o'clock, so we could be a warm-up for Hollyoaks, which was struggling in that this was their big soap opera, and it was dying on its ass in the ratings. So they basically moved us to becoming Hollyoaks warm-up, which arguably saved that show, and now, it's still on Channel 4 to this day, as far as I'm aware. We didn't like it because it just meant there was a whole lot of people who just could not get back from work in time to watch the show, so our ratings were going to suffer.
Sky Plus it.
But do they even...
In 1996 and 95.
VHS it is what you mean.
No, that's exactly what I meant. It was meant to be as an ironic joke.
I know.
Today it's so different. I mean, everything's available on the internet or, to put it onto your hard drive, whatever. But back then, I mean, trying to find the Video Plus number and type that in and, the 16-digit number was just insane. And quite honestly, the time slot obviously didn't suit it.
And I'm assuming you couldn't argue for the time slot after Hollyoaks.
No, because then you were into that. 7 o'clock was always Channel 4 News, and then after that you were into, the kind of the so-called quote-unquote big shows, which again was ironic given that we were getting bigger ratings than those so-called quote-unquote big shows, and it would have been fascinating to see what we would have done if we'd been on at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. We did argue for a late night slot. In fact, I think at one point there might have even been an ultimatum given during Series 6, which was we were only interested in doing another series if it was going to get a late night slot. Because we felt we had done everything we could have done with different settings and different attitudes and different backstories. We'd done everything we could with video games at that time slot. The only other thing we could possibly have done would have been to make it very, very much more adult, much more mature. And Channel 4 just said no. So if I remember correctly, that's what was happening towards the end of Series 6, which is why we did this show's ending on the air.
I'm interested in this idea of the more adult GamesMaster. I'm assuming it wouldn't just have been like the Gore special every week.
No, I think it probably would have been.
What other game with blood can we get in? Night Trap?
I think that by then, it had become pretty self-indulgent, but in a way that still carried most of the audience along with it. I think we probably would have disappeared completely up our own arse. I think it would have got more and more surreal. But then again, you look at something like Sky Sports, the Saturday morning football show. What's it called? The one that's been running for ages.
Tony,
Helen Chamberlain does it.
Football Focus. That's the one in the evening. Soccer Saturday. I don't know.
Soccer AM. That's it, right.
Okay.
Now, that has got the most surreal comic in-jokes and characters that are just off the scale. So I guess that shows that maybe you can keep on doing it like that and keep going and keep going. We had one more set up our sleeve, and that was a pirate ship.
You have an eye patch. I would have watched that.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah, that was it. But you must remember that by this stage, many of the creative influences of the show were drinking a lot and doing a lot of drugs, and so it's quite hard for some of us to remember points in the timeline in terms of when we came up with stuff. When the pirate ship one, we're never quite sure if that was one we had at the time or that was one we had like in 2005 on one of those occasions we got together and went, you know what, if it did come back, where would we set it?
So, who was this team? Because you mentioned a couple of them already, and basically, if you want to give them their props, now is the time. Who did you work with?
There was 2 stages of GamesMaster. There was the first couple of series, where the creative team was Jane Hewland, me, and then Adam Wood, the producer, Cameron McAllister, the director. Mm-hmm. That was the first 2 series. Putting aside series 3, from series 4 on in was what I think of as the real golden age of GamesMaster. The creative team then was Johnny Finch, the producer, Steve Wright, the director, Richard Wilcox, who was our senior researcher, myself, and Jane Hewland still. And those were the people that were responsible for it. Jane was great. Jane was amazing because by then the success of GamesMaster allowed her company to go on and do other things. So she was taking more and more of a back seat, and it would literally be the 4 of us would just get so messed up. Really just beyond off the scale and come up with the stuff, and then the next day we'd look at it again, and so much of that ended up in the show. And we would run it by Jane, and Jane would just say, too much. No, that's okay. And I hear that it's very similar to the way the Beatles came up with Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.